Alright guys, so in this video I want to finish up the validation for the register and login. Now basically, if we want something to not be empty, like let's say the name, we don't want it to be empty, then we can say if validator dot is empty, not is email, is empty, and pass in data dot name, and then we can just do errors dot name equals name is required, or let's do name field is required. Now the problem is, if a request is sent and they don't send the name, it's not going to be a string, it's not going to be an empty string, and that's what it needs to be for this is empty to work, because that's part of validator. So what we want to do is, if we're testing for something to be empty, we first need it to be an empty string. So what I'm going to do is say data dot name is equal to not is empty, and this is the is empty that we created, which will take in at just about anything. It'll check for null, undefined, all that stuff. And again, you could use something like Lodash, but I wanted to minimize the libraries. So we'll say data.name, and we're going to use a ternary, so we'll say if it's not empty, then it's going to be whatever it is, data.name. If it is empty, then it's just going to be an empty string, and then it'll get tested here as an empty string. Okay, so it first goes through this, and then it'll go through this. Okay. So we want to do that for anything that we want to make sure is there, okay, or I should say is required. So we want name, email, password, and we're also going to have a field called password2. Now password2 isn't used on the server, but we still want to validate it. We want to validate it, make sure that it's actually being sent. Because even though this stuff, we're putting this on the server, these responses, these tests are going to be run from the client. Okay, or I should say the client is it's gonna go through the server and get sent back to the client. So let's copy this up here. Let's do it a few times here. So the second one will be email. And this one will be password. And password2 is basically like the confirm password. All right, so that'll, at least if they're not there at all, they'll get put in, it'll be an empty string, and then we can do our testing down here. So let's do another is empty. I'm going to copy this one, and we want to do it for email. It would be errors.email. Now we also want to make sure it's a valid email, so I'm going to just copy this, and then we're going to say validator.isEmail. Okay, so the errors.email, that'll be the same, but we want the message to be changed to email is invalid. We also want to check to make sure that the password is there, so let's paste in another is empty and put in our data password. So this will be errors.password. All right, let's also make sure that the password is between 6, let's see, we'll do 6 and then 30 max. So we'll say validator.is length data.password, and then it also takes in min 6, and max, we'll say 30. And then let's see, the error will be errors.password, and we're going to say password must be at least 6 characters. Okay, so now we want to make sure that the password 2 is there, so let's do another is empty. This will be password 2, and then it'll be errors.password 2, and then here we'll say confirm password field is required, and then finally we want to make sure confirm matches the password. So for that we have a validator.equals, and this takes in the 2 fields that we want to match, which is data.password and data.password2, and we'll say errors.password2 equals passwords must match. So now let's save this, and it should work. So let's go to Postman. So if we send, so now we get all these errors. We get name must be between 2 and 30. If I get rid of name completely and send, we'll get name field is required. Email is required, and password 2 are required. Because in our React application, our form that we send is going to be directly sent to that route. Okay, it's going to be directly sent to that register route. So it's going to check for all this stuff. Now, if I were to, let's just try to register another user. So we'll say John Doe email John at, actually let's do an email that's not formatted correctly. So if I were to send, password field is required, passwords must match. So this doesn't seem to be working. Let's check. Is email errors.email. So that should. Oh, you know why? Because is email passes. We want to do if not validator is email. Let's try that. So now if we send, we get email is invalid. So let's say John at Gmail. That will pass. All right. Let's do password. Password 2. Let's make it not match. Passwords must be at least 6 characters. It is. Min6 data.password. Again, I have to put an exclamation here. I keep forgetting that. And then right here for equals should also be, we're basically saying if it's not equal. All right. Passwords must match. So now if I do 6, now this should all pass and it should actually create the user. So let's submit, and there we go. So now we should have another user registered. Okay, and we could use this user to log in and get a token for him. So now let's do the same for login. So what I'll do is copy the whole register validation file and go to the login validation file, paste that in. And let's see, we don't have a name, so we can get rid of that. We can get rid of password 2. All we have is email and password. Basically all I want is email is required, password is required, and email is valid. So let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. We'll keep email is required, email is valid, password is required, and we can get rid of the rest of this stuff. And that's it for the login. Okay, we just want to change the name of the function to login input. All right, we're going to save it. We're going to go back to our user's route and bring that in. And let's copy what we did right here at the beginning of register. So all we have to do is add this at the beginning. We don't have to mess with anything else unless we're reporting errors like from within here. But these are just basic is require, is empty, and stuff like that. So let's go to the login and let's see. Yeah, before we do anything, we're just going to put that in. And let's make sure we change this to login input like that. And that should do it. Now here you can see we're sending an error, user not found. Instead, let's take errors dot, what is it, email. And then we can just pass in errors. Okay, let's see if we have anything else right here. Instead of sending the error directly, we'll just add it to the object. So errors.password this time equals password incorrect, and we'll pass in errors. All right, let's save. So now if we were to try to log in, let's go to login. And let's remove email and password and send. Email is invalid. Password field is required. Now, the reason email is invalid is showing and not email is required is the order. If we go to the login validation, we want the required to be last. So we can take this and move this down. Like that. So now if we send again, email is required, and then if we put an email that is invalid, we should get that message. Good. Password is required. If I put a password, there we go. So if I put a valid email that is nothing, meaning it's not a real user. What the heck? User not found. If we do, actually let's do our new user. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's do our new user, which is John Doe. I think it was John at Gmail. If we send that with the wrong password, we get password incorrect. Send it with the right password, we get a token. And this token is for John. Okay? If we were to take this token and go to our protected route and change it out, this is Brad's token. Oops. Let's replace it. And send. And we get John. Okay, so the user is embedded inside the token. All right, so that's going to be it for the validation. We're going to be doing this throughout all of our different routes to validate things like profile information. When they submit profile data, we want to make sure we check that. And then these messages will actually be showing in our application as well. All right, so thanks for watching, guys. I will see you actually in the next section.